Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/running on ice. Today, we welcome Paul Coleman, Director of North America Sales at Sunset Transportation. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thanks for having me. How's it been? Long time.
It's been good. It's always a good time. I always consider it like a good day when we get Sunset on the show, or I guess now Armada, because you guys are kind of mingling in with them after the acquisition a couple of years ago. But it's still a good time to kind of go back to before and to say, Sunset's actually pretty cool for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, we got a special little place here that we love, and certainly I've been fortunate enough to be a part of. And I started, I think, back in 2017 when I moved back to St. Louis, had an opportunity to be a part of this squad here. And it's really been a good journey since then, and looking forward to the future now at Armada, and certainly enjoy working for them and the people that they have. Running the company has been a really jolt in the arm to kind of see where the future holds. So,
yeah, you kind of answered my first question for you, which was let's get some background on you and how you got started at Sunset. But it sounds like it just kind of happened and you've stayed there ever since.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I moved back to St. Louis and I was looking for places to work, and had a friend that knew Lindsay, and so that's how kind of was the way I got introduced to Sunset, and originally started out in our group called SAM, which is our strategic account management group, and really had an opportunity to kind of get my feet wet with Sunset, with our culture, and really everything that we stood for, by getting acquainted with and kind of acclimated to a lot of our existing customers. And really that group's intention is to try to grow and maintain our existing customer base. So it gave me a good chance to kind of feel out really what we were about, what we stood for. And then I made a transition into the sales role in 2011 or 2021, I should say. And then have really hit the ground running since then, and really had a really enjoyable time being able to bring on new business and kind of help lead our business development group here.
So one of the things that you have done, so you kind of have a very unique perspective when it comes to, going out and prospecting new customers and kind of having those initial conversations with customers, because you were on that account management side. You were on the side of things that, saw those implementations, saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, and saw kind of what set people up for success. So when you are going to a prospect or an existing customer, or if you're having some of those conversations of like, hey, how's it going? Are we meeting your needs? What are you looking for? What are some of those real challenges that you're still seeing shippers struggle with when it comes to those temperature controlled shipments? Because those are pretty tricky. Those aren't just, oh, I need it to go from point A to point B. It's like, no, I need it to go from point A to point B with this list of extra requirements. What are some of those common things that you're seeing that kind of either make you go, ooh, that's a tricky one, or no worries, we got that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think certainly two of the biggest areas are going to be the visibility and reliability factors. And this kind of probably transcends more than just refrigerated freight, but certainly with refrigerated freight being of such a critical nature typically, right? So the product has a shelf life typically and has some certain requirements that really are contingent on it being arriving at the right temperature and things, making sure, especially if it's food in nature. But like the visibility and reliability of the equipment is really the paramount area that we're seeing a humongous requirement, not just from the customer side, but really, just to maintain quality control too as well.
Because that quality is the famous example I always love to, well, not really famous, but the example I always love to use is, if you're shipping denim from Southern California to Texas and like a whole trailer of, I almost said wagon. We're not in the 1800s anymore. We're, using trucks. Um, but a whole truckload of just denim jeans, it doesn't matter if they get below freezing or if they get to 120 degrees, because when they still arrive at their destination, it's still going to be a pair of jeans you can put on, you can use, and they're going to be fine, like no matter what temperature they get to. That being said, I don't know if jeans melt. I'm sure they do, but that's regardless, that's not happening in your
They
ships.
catch on
Like,
fire,
I know
so that could be.
Arizona's hot. Right. And if there's a fire, there's a much bigger problem than just your jeans melted, if we're being honest. Uh, but with the temperature side of things, like, if something's supposed to stay at 35 degrees and it accidentally ends up frozen, like that is completely potentially unusable. And that's kind of a much higher stake than just, oh, yeah, we needed it to go from point A to point B. It's like there's actual, like, potential problems and claims and expenses that come with these missed windows.
Sure. Well, and to add to that, you know, we're talking a lot of times in food, and that's where we do a lot of our refrigerated and temp controlled product is falling into that food and beverage sector. So there's also a time critical nature of it. You know, we've got to get it to a place so that it can be distributed on time. Because even if the product is maintained at a certain temperature, it does have only a shelf life of maybe 2 weeks or something like that to be able to be put out into to market for product. And so not only are you have all these outside factors like temperature outside, weather, the type of equipment, making sure the gen sets are running and staying on time or to the temperature that they're asked to be held. There's also a time critical nature to this too as well. So there's a lot of factors that kind of go into temp control that make it a much more heightened and certainly critical nature to getting it delivered on time and having that visibility to knowing where it's at and what's going on in the journey of a transport is critical for our customers.
Yeah, because you need like the voice inside of the freight of like, hey, what's going on? How's it doing? Because you can't really just like call a pallet of strawberries and be like, you good? I mean, you probably could, but I don't think that would be a good day at work if you're talking to strawberries.
No, I think it'd be pretty boring and maybe you might need to find something else to do with your day. Now, bananas, that might be a better conversation, but strawberries, they're probably the most boring fruit, I would say. So,
I don't know about that. They're pretty delicious, but I imagine they're not very chatty. Bananas, they have that natural like phone curve. Um, so when it comes to um carrier selection, that's something that having seen firsthand, Sunset handles very well, like top of the top. There's a lot that the others could learn. I'll leave it there. There's a lot that others could learn from what you guys have done over there. But when it comes to the qualities that, okay, you have a new food shipper that you've just brought on and you're going to match them with some of their first carriers to start hauling, what are some of those qualities that you look for on behalf of your shipper for each carrier? Because a carrier that's grade A for this shipper might not be good for this new one that you've brought on, but vice versa. A shipper that or carrier nope, a carrier that would work for shipper A is not for shipper B, but for the one, and vice versa. I think I just repeated myself. Cody didn't
it's all
that
good.
right.
I can read you.
You
I
know
know
what
what
I'm
you're at.
saying.
No, that's a good question, right? Because I think it comes down to qualifying what the customer wants and needs first and foremost, right? And I remember, in a previous job, we had a customer that was shipping cheese and they requested the temperature to be set to frozen, where the shipper was requesting it to be set at like 34. So just above freezing, right? Because it was a fresh product. But that was the quality control aspect of trying to make sure and qualifying a customer, which is this is what we want versus the way that they typically do it. So I think it starts really at that sort of level of identifying what does your customer want, what are their needs, then understanding that and taking it next to like basically the capacity level. So, and I think a big area, and like you touched on this, which was Sunset does a really good job of qualifying our carriers too as well, staying in communication and treating them as customers all the same as like our other customers, which is identifying, who are our top level type of providers and partners that we want to partner with. Because as we touched on earlier, we're talking a lot of critical nature product, and it's expensive too as well. Typically, and maybe in the dry world, if a product shifts or a product arrives late, it might still be salvageable. But at least in the temp control world, you're talking potentially an entire loss, right? And so an entire truckload of 80,000, 100,000, $250,000, that's a big number. And so you've got to make sure that you're working with partners and drivers who are reliable and have, newer equipment that are trustworthy, that are able to be visible and you can track and trust where they're at. So I think that part of qualifying the carriers and the drivers is an integral part of really being a solid partner in the temp control space.
I think that's a really important part because it's more than just, oh, this shipper needs someone that will move cheese at 34 degrees. And then this carrier that says, well, we've always moved cheese regardless of anyone at frozen. And it's kind of more of that, well, I understand that the rest of the industry might move cheese frozen, but this specific shipper is requesting that it not be frozen. And so it's really kind of knowing that that partner is going to follow the weird idiosyncrasies and the weird requests of one specific shipper because that's how they want it done, regardless of what the rest of the industry or what the rest of the other cheese shippers might do. Is that you know that you can rely on that shipper or not that shipper, that carrier to kind of sit not not take it seriously, like just say, okay, yeah, we'll keep it at 34. And then they end up keeping it at frozen. That's not what we would consider a successful match. But that's good that you guys have those relationships to say, hey, this is what we're doing. And this is why it's weird. Like, we know it's weird. We know it's not the industry average, but it's what the shipper wants. So let's just go with it.
Yeah, and I mean, this transcends just business, but communication, right? It's the key to enhancing and making any relationship or partnership really, succeed. And that begins from the very beginning of qualifying a customer and understanding the requirements and the needs and wants of what they want to do. And then, a lot of times it's just that back and forth communication on making sure, did we hear that correctly? Are you sure you want this? Or making sure that, you know, they understand too as well. Like, if we're driving through Laredo, like, and it's 110 degrees outside, certainly understanding if there's other qualifications that need to be revisited and or discussed, routes, etc. So
Yeah, it's the dare I say the little things of communication, which shouldn't be the little things. It should be something that everybody does, but people are so hesitant to just like, I don't want to say push back, but almost like question their shipper of like, hey, are you sure that this is what you meant? Are you sure that this is correct? Because if that's the case, cool, no problem. But if not, like, we don't want to do all of this work for you just to be like, that's not right at all. And then we're, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of lost product or just a claims nightmare down the road going, well, we did it. We did it. But
yeah,
if we just would have had one conversation, we could have avoided all of this.
the little things here could be huge financial windfalls. So that's where, it really is important to cross the T's and dot the I's and ensure that, you know, the expectations and are understood and met. So
Yeah. So one of the things that you brought up earlier that's really interesting, especially in the cold storage and cold chain space, is that tracking component because there's a lot, especially I know you guys aren't number one pharmaceuticals, but you do handle some pharmaceuticals and you do food service as well. But a lot of the cold chain side of things, especially when it comes to those temperature loggers or those tracking devices, they're kind of running on some older technology. They're running on the things where you got to get the USB stick after the shipment delivers, stick it in, copy and paste, and then use Excel to look for deviations. And my guys, it's 2025. We need to stop running our supply chains on Excel. But there's so many developments in the real time space where within seconds or even predictively that this is going to fall out of temperature, and you can kind of work to keep ahead of it. So how do you guys balance the requirements or the shippers that, they love the old fashioned tech. They love it. They're like, it's reliable. What we have works. How do you balance those with the ones that are like, oh, you have new technology, you have real time visibility, real time everything. We want that. How do you balance those two?
Sure. Well, it starts really informing the customer of what we can offer, and that'll be
Mhm.
typically the starting conversation will be integration, just the basic level of communication that can become instantaneous. A big part of Sunset is we are flexible. We are able to kind of blend a lot of different needs and wants from customers because, as you know, even at the same customer, there might be different people or different ways to
Mhm.
communicate internally between one person and the next. One may like to call, another may like to do email, a third may like to just have everything be transmitted through our portal and through the our dashboards. And so being able to understand those requirements and then be able to offer differing options is critical. And we typically like to make sure our customers are aware of our integration abilities right from the start, because certainly um, we want to make this easier, right? We don't want it to be more challenging. We don't want to have more work if it can be done quicker and simpler. So integration is key, and that extends not just from our customer relationships to say Sunset, but also to our carriers. So we'll have ELD communication directly to their units. So if we need to pull information from the genset, or we need to pull information at any given moment throughout the journey of a transit, we can have that at our fingertips, to being able to having really the visibility of where a truck is at any given moment. As you're aware of, theft is also a big issue right now in our space, and you touched on pharmaceuticals and things of high visibility and high critical nature are important for us to keep our eyes and understand where they're at any given moment during a journey. So these are things that Sunset takes very seriously, and is at the forefront of trying to find and identify technology that is really able to help us enhance and open the visibility sector to, and then pushing it to our customers too as well, so that we can offer that as a value added benefit of partnering with us.
I think that's a really important part that you guys do, especially one of the things you mentioned at the beginning was, you meet your customer where you're at. And if that is, you're still running AS400, you're doing USB logs at the end of the day, we can work with that. We can. But just in case you want to upgrade, we're also here for that. But I do like it that you guys are like, we can work with just about anything, whether it's prehistoric Stone Age or current. We love it. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people kind of miss is that, you don't have to come in and promise all these solutions and these great things. You can just say, okay, we'll start where you're at. And then maybe slowly, if you're open to it, work up to something that resembles from the last 2 decades.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, change is sometimes pretty difficult, especially for people that have been running an operation that has by and large ran smoothly, or it's running right. You don't want to rock the boat right away, and or completely rip the band-aid off. So I think personally, our flexibility allows for a lot of options for people to be comfortable, and then letting them and educating them on what's out there to potentially help and make their day easier is really my and our job to being a really quality partner. So
It's those little steps of like, hey, we noticed that, this lane always seems to have like this delivery on Tuesday, half the product always seems to run out of has run out of temperature or run out of something. So why don't we just kind of shift it? Or why don't we put this device in place just to see, just to try it once? And then, oh, look, we may have solved the problem. And then it's just kind of that. It's the hey, we see we have this problem, let's work together on solving it, because just letting this problem continue on over and over and over again, it's kind of futile, you know.
yeah, I mean, continuous improvement ideas is really what we're also striving to identify, right? Like if you're identifying a route that's having trouble, or the material is showing up damaged. It's our job to try to educate and help provide best in class solutions to our existing customers on what can do better to make your customers happier too as well. So
So, kind of part of those best in class solutions, obviously, you brought up it's keeping up with technology, trends, innovations, et cetera, et cetera. Because again, not every solution is going to be great for every shipper. You're going to have different ones all over. But when it comes to the future, what technology, this could be, I will open it up. This could be either temperature related or dry van related. What technology you do or trend that you see kind of coming up on the pipeline are you most kind of excited for?
yeah, I think especially at least in the temp control space is alternative fuels, and really the sustainability of reducing our carbon footprint, and trying to be honest too as well, to reduce cost, right? I mean, these things cost money. Current, if you're using diesel to keep these on, that's more fuel used. So if there's ways to find more efficient fuel sources, efficient equipment to keep the temperature at, or keeping the product at temperature, that's really, I think, especially for the temp control sector, very important right now. And then this gets into kind of in general, but it's the visibility, right? It's getting live updates and tracking information that is able to be put out at a fingertip, which really is ongoing right now. But to having more and sharper technology to showing where this product is, given the nature too with current trends in theft and I guess lost shipments, et cetera. That's really another area that I think is important for us to continuing to focus on. And I think what's important about that too is it gives us that reliability that we're really always looking for. If we can make sure shipments are arriving on time and in full and getting product without any damages, really that's a critical of importance right now for our side. So
The alternative fuels are really cool in the reefer space. I'm really glad you brought that up. That's one of my favorite things to kind of go down the wormhole of, what are people working on? Even some of those crazy cats that's putting solar panels on top of trailers to
yeah.
use it to fuel the reefer units. 10 out of 10, I love. But yeah, I also, those are two solid answers because again, visibility, yeah, everybody knows where those blue dots are on the map, but also down to like the granular level. Like there's some that are even getting as crazy as like the individual package container, whatever wrapped up inside a pallet and some of that level. And there are some that are even like doing that specific, but then also learning like how quickly something is, especially in like the fruit space, they're like putting off gas that makes other fruit around them wilt. So you can like rearrange your warehouse or your truck or like vehicle accordingly.
Mhm.
I'm really glad you said those because those are some really cool innovations that are only going to get better and only make things just only improve the situation in the supply chain because we're going to see less loss. We're going to see less physical loss of stolen cargo or the more recovered cargo, and just it's just going to be better. And I'm so excited for it.
Yeah, who wants to bite into a stale or past due strawberry because it was sitting next to some corn that was putting out some sweat or something like that. That's no good.
Exactly. Yeah, nobody wants a bunch of like non-ripe avocado or like just like mushy avocados because they sat next to bananas for too long. But yeah, I'm excited. Avocado toast for all. That
Breakfast
being
with
said,
champions.
Paul, we are coming towards the end of our time today, but there's a question that everybody comes in the show has to answer. So, Paul, is cereal considered a soup?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, does soup have to have a liquid? Because when I was a kid, I used to house Cheerios and the Honey Nut Cheerios just straight out of the box.
Yeah.
I kind of called it cereal, but do you have to have milk, or do you have to have some sort of liquid to make it a soup? I mean, see, I don't know. I think like it's a question that personally I wouldn't call cereal soup if you had to, brass tacks, like if gun against my head. No, I wouldn't say it is. But you start convincing me that, milk and you have a soup, have a liquid sort of base to making a soup. Well, then, I could start leaning into that sort of sector. But truth be told, no, I don't think soup is or I don't think cereal is a soup personally. So, but bigger
I
question:
don't either.
is soup a meal? That's the thing I want to get to the end of.
I think it does because it's got like the meat and it's got all of the components of a thing. I know some people say it's like an appetizer because you get like soup and a salad before your meal. To me, it can be an entire meal. In our house, it is eaten as an entire meal.
Can soup be a breakfast? Can a breakfast be a dinner? See, this is getting deep now. Like, can you have cereal, say at dinner, and can you call that, I just had soup as opposed to cereal? Like, is
I mean,
cereal
I do have
specific to
breakfast
the
for
type of
dinner.
meal? What's that?
You can't have breakfast for dinner with like pancakes and bacon and like breakfast food at dinner time. So,
That's
but I've
so. I
never
mean,
had
see, that's where
breakfast soup.
it's complicated. Now we're talking all kinds of different angles. That I think depending on when you eat cereal, it could be maybe a soup. Maybe it's not a soup if you have it before noon. Afternoon, it becomes a soup.
Or is it just a snack? Like what is the lines of is cereal a meal or is it a snack? Could it be a
Not when you
breakfast
start
snack?
putting bananas and strawberries in it. And then if
That's true.
you're starting to get a little bit more dynamic with fruits and vegetables. And I don't know if anybody's putting vegetables in cereal, but
I would hope
curious.
not.
I wonder what kind of vegetable you'd even put in a cereal.
Look, there are some crazy kids who put like mushed up vegetables and turn it into a cereal. I guarantee that exists out in the world. But yeah.
Does cereal have to have a grain, or could cereal be just like if you have milk and you just put bananas and strawberries in there? Is that a cereal?
No, because that's fruit with milk.
Okay, so you got to have a
Because
grain.
then you cross into smoothie slash milkshake territory if you're just putting fruits and milk together.
Can you have a soup out of a cup, or does a soup need to be in a bowl? Or for that matter, a cereal, does that need to be?
I've eaten cereal out of a cup. I'll be a monster that says I've eaten cereal out of a cup. That's my preferred method of consuming cereal, if I'm being honest, because the handle is just so convenient.
Does cereal require milk, or could you put beer or water?
I mean, doing with water is not good. I've tried that. I just eat it dry because I'm a monster. Um, but I don't know. We've gone too
What kind of
far
milk?
down the rabbit
Whole
hole.
milk, skim milk, 2%. I mean, like, what is you know, you
Now we're
gotta kind
into
of.
like what constitutes milk, and that's too far. That's a bridge too far today.
We don't have
We're
enough
gonna end up
time for that.
we don't have time. We're gonna hurt our brains. It's not gonna be a good time. But
Oh,
if anyone has any thoughts on cereal as soup or soup as a meal or anything like that, or if they have any questions about what we've talked about today, where can they find you outside the show?
right now, I've got a newborn, so my life is spent making sure she's happy and helping my wife out too as well around the home. But if you're looking for me outside, typically outside of sunset for that matter, I like to be outdoors and try to enjoy golf, skiing, living down at the lake, all kinds of outdoor activities. So, but really, it's mostly around the family right now. So, taking care of newborn is a full time job. So,
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Mary, thank you very much. Good to see you as always.
It's nice to see you as well. And you can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.